of our speakers for this upcoming session?
We sure do. Yeah, let's go ahead and introduce the next topic. We're just a couple minutes early, so I think that's okay, but I'm really excited to introduce the next topic, the exponential strategies that leverage N50 as a program of programs. And so David and Kevin, I'm going to let you introduce the panelists or idea instigators, as you will. So we're excited about hearing about some of these strategies and ideas that are pushing us forward and continue to expand our collective consciousness about digital inclusion. Welcome, everyone.
Good to see everybody here.
Hello.
Shashi, good to see you. I have the pleasure of talking with these folks almost on a weekly basis in different forums. This is the first time I've had the chance to have everyone together, and I always like it when some of my favorite people get to come together in this great way. Just briefly, let me touch on an introduction, but I'm going to let these folks further introduce themselves. We have Kim Boutwell, who is an ESG program manager at Dell, and we have Bob Olwig, who's an executive vice president. I'm looking for your exact title here. It shifts on me. Global Partner Alliances.
Yeah.
Global Partner Alliances, which is fantastic. It's a perfect fit within N50, and it's been so valuable to us as we go forth this. And Shashi Mariputtana, leading 5G and edge acceleration at Intel. Welcome. If we could have you guys tell us a little bit more than I said about yourselves and your role within N50, and then we'll get underway with the session. Bob, why don't you go first?
Sure. Hey, thanks, Kevin. Great to see you, David, the entire N50 and Geeks team. It's great to be part of this. Thanks. Yeah, so I lead our global partner alliances at Worldwide. Have been with Worldwide. We're a global technology solution provider based in St. Louis, but have a presence around the world. And for the past 26 years, I've had various roles at Worldwide. And the latest role has really been driving and leading strategic partnerships. And I want to give a shout out to both Kim and Shashi for the great strategic partnerships that Worldwide has with both Dell and Intel. I would put Dell and Intel right at the top, in terms of fantastic partnerships, not only with our customers, but in the areas of giving back to our communities.
That's fantastic. Shashi?
Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Shashi Mariputtana. Actually, my partner in crime is actually Daniel Gettman. He was one of the people who actually introduced the whole concept of N50 within Intel, and so passionate about it. And so when he started it, as part of Intel has a RISE program, which is our corporate program. And so as part of that, he started this N50 as an idea to close the digital divide, right? Not so much with connectivity, but really addressing the people who are not participating in the digital world. So then he was looking for people like-minded who would come help him. And since he was not a network person, he came into our team and said, hey, would anybody be interested? And I've been in the wireless industry for over 30 years, right? And I've seen the impact wireless has made on people, right? And as you see, I come from India. In India, every time I go back, I've just been amazed at how much wireless has changed lives, right? From the time when I was growing up to have a phone call with my grandma, we had to set up a call, wait, right? And then she would come on to the post office and then I would talk to her, right? To now everybody has a phone, you see, how it's impacting it. So I was really passionate about it, joined him. I've not been as active in N50 as I would like to be, as Dan has. So I'm a poor representative for him, but Intel is totally committed to this. And I cannot believe how many partners have joined. I think we're over 100 plus now. And in such a short span of time. So truly what we're doing here is amazing. Looking forward to doing more and seeing how Intel can help.
Hey, Shashi, I'll tell you, Shashi, Dan Goodwine definitely makes up for multiple people in terms of his enthusiasm and passion for N50. So he too lured me into the N50 realm.
Yeah. Yep.
It's true. Kim?
Hi, I'm Kim Boutwell at Dell Technologies. I'm in the environmental social government space, but my day-to-day awesome opportunity is that I created a program just before the pandemic to empower students in schools to become certified Dell technicians, and they service the hardware of their peers. So everyone gets to stay in classroom learning. When someone leaves their pencil on their keyboard and shuts their laptop, which you can imagine happens a few times a day in schools. The greatest part is that they're becoming ready for what's next after high school with career readiness skills and customer service and entrepreneurship. And this year we should certify about 3,000 kids between August and May. And I couldn't be more proud of the educators out there in the classrooms, over 130 classrooms right now, that are preparing kids to start their certifications any day now.
Right.
That is fantastic, and just a perfect segue to what we wanted to talk about today, because obviously we have, three very, very powerful, important organizations for N50. All three are founding members of N50, and we've heard some of the roots of how N50 came to be just from this conversation. And these folks here on this panel are exceptional individuals within the program. These companies have led several projects within N50 just so far. But we want to dig in a little underneath that and talk about some of the programs, initiatives, and special sauce that goes into this work. And that's why we have these three folks here to talk about that today. There were things, and Kim mentioned this a moment ago, that were planned and unplanned that came about as a result of the pandemic or the opportunities in N50. And so we kind of want to explore that a little bit. So maybe it would be good to give you each a little bit of time to sort of talk further about these opportunities. Kim just glanced over a little bit of what she's doing in this space, and look at that more and think about the tipping points where these models that work can open up more opportunities for folks to attach onto in their organizations to see what might work. Small or large, these are all making a huge impact and putting a really positive light on the organization's efforts in this space. Kim, let's go reverse order back to you again and have you start off. Tell us more about this Tech Crew program that you got, and where it's at and where it's going.
Yeah, so we started off with just 9 schools in 2019. So the 19-20 school year was the perfect year to start a pilot, right? Because nothing else was going on. But yeah, it survived. And, some people were like, oh, well, it won't make it past once we go to virtual learning. It expedited it because, as we know, especially in the United States, the education system went 1-to-1 overnight, right? So more devices with more tiny humans means more opportunity to practice hardware repairs. And so it's been really great. What I think I would say in reference to your starting stem there about how can other organizations leverage this type of idea. The idea to do this for me came from, what do we, Dell, partner with on corporations to empower them to do? How can we then mimic that empowerment in different settings? So at Dell, we have a portal, an opportunity for people to do self-maintenance, repair things yourself, right? Rather than having a technician come in, which really came in handy when no one could go in anyone else's house, right? But we empower our partners globally to learn and repair devices. Why couldn't we be doing this with those that need career opportunities more than anyone, those in a disadvantaged situation? And so it really fed into digital inclusion very well that way. And I think that each corporation or each partner here has things that they maybe don't pull out immediately, but there's things that you do that are empowering your customers and your partners. How do you sort of turn a little bit and turn that to empower others without having to start and create something brand new? Start with something you're already doing and just zhuzh it a little bit so that it works for a population that needs that opportunity. How's that, Kevin?
Well, it's fantastic, of course. And I've heard you elaborate on this quite a bit. One of the things that's fascinating about this, and I keep having my attention drawn to this topic in all of our sessions is that this is not a purely philanthropic effort, right? This is something that is great for Dell business, right? You've got the data and the numbers to show how this is not only great for digital inclusion, but it's a positive impact to the bottom line. What are you seeing there in terms of results so far?
Yeah, so, you know, it depends on which way you're looking at it. It provides societal and business impacts simultaneously. And we're not having to give up our ability to produce business and revenue in order to do good things. They're feeding each other. And that's really how we get to the next step, because everybody will run out of the checking account, so to speak, that you can give for philanthropy. So how do you continue to refill that bucket and make that bucket larger so that you can give back to more people? And so what we're seeing is that, you know, when we're compared laptop to laptop, but we're bringing an empowerment to repair on site by your kids, for your kids, they're like, yes, sign me up. That's great, right? It's great for the kids. It's great for Dell. We're also seeing for the first time, you know, schools, and Kevin and I had a little experience with this. When you buy a whole bunch of devices, you're asked, do you want this or this or this? And you've got the a la carte menu of everything, and it's overwhelming, right? And schools are like, nah, we're not going to invest in any of that. And then the very first day you give out devices, kids drop them. And you're like, oh, that's what that thing was, that accidental damage thing that they offered. Now I get it. It's for when the kids drop it and have oopsies, right? So we're also able to use this program as a way to educate the customers about their products that they can buy and how they can buy it and what it is in a way that's not, in a way that's true to them and meets them where they are. So, you know, we've got that going on in the business, but then from the society standpoint, I'm now starting to see the kids get jobs. I had a mother find me on Facebook this weekend just to thank me because her son was the first one in the family to have a job with benefits in the entire family. And I'm really proud of him and proud for her and the family. But we're starting to see more and more of the students that are going on to pursue IT or getting jobs in when they didn't have a plan before. Now they have a plan. Mm-hmm. So business and society, you don't have to trade and look for them, but you do them together.
Yeah, so sales opportunity, a leaner process for maintaining devices, and you're building a future-ready workforce along the way. It's pretty cool. David, I'm going to ask the easy questions for the next two folks in the same light, and you get to ask the hard questions following that. So, Shashi, what's going on at Intel that is in this realm, that is a program that works in this way?
Yeah, so the example that I can give is actually, you know, it started in parallel. You know, Dan came to me with this opportunity, and actually our salesperson in Africa was looking at a program with MTN to figure out how we could get better connectivity in Africa, right? So he came in actually as a business proposal, right? He came in as a salesperson. He came in and said, hey, if we could do this, it's just not purely from a societal good, but it's actually good business for Intel. Because when we can come up with examples of how to build networks which reach people, which are lower cost, which have applications on them, we can take it and replicate it around the world, right? It also tied in with an overall strategy we had from an Intel perspective. And like you said in my title, right, I have 5G and edge acceleration. So all we're talking about nowadays is the edge. And what do we mean by the edge, right? The edge is basically getting compute closer and closer to where the data is getting created. How better to exploit it than just show what applications best run on the edge. So I go back to the project we've been doing in Zambia, right? Because that was a project I really got involved in. And we started looking at the challenges of what it was going to take to build this network in Luombo, you know, and the first application we said, and I think it comes across everywhere, it's either education or it's agriculture that really, you know, we need in order for digital inclusion as the initial application. So here we came Luangbo, we said it should be education. So we started looking for partners who would come in. And I think that's what Intel does really best. Because as Intel, you know, we reach, I mean, that's what's been fascinating for me working at Intel, the number of types of companies we reach, both big and small. So we were able to bring together different kinds of companies. As an example, right? We needed a really small form factor, low compute solution for the core, for the wireless core. We brought in Freedom 5 to do that. We needed somebody with a micro edge solution, and we brought in PicoNets for that solution, right? So we were able to bring it in. And I think through that, now we are creating this recipe or a blueprint that we feel we can use elsewhere. And as Kim was saying, right, it actually is good business for Intel as well, right? Of course, we have to see the project initially and things like that. But once we're coming up with this blueprint, we can use it for both small and large opportunities, right? So lots of great learnings are, come from this. And then the Ukraine projects is the other one that I think, has been, all of us have been so proud of the fact that because we were a few companies that were able to bring together partners in such a short span of time, right? Within 4 weeks, or, we were able to kind of define what these containers were going to look like, what the connectivity solution was needed. And we had, what was it, David, over 15 of them, right? Ready to go. And it was just because it was a cause bigger than all of us. We were all willing to come in. And it's not just the money, right? It was just the competence that came in with, I think, the power of the network.
That's so true. That's so true. Bob, I'm curious how you're going to answer this. I know you've seen the value of N50 in different ways in worldwide technology, from employees, satisfied with their job. What would you put out as an example of how this is working with worldwide technology?
Well, Shashi just brought up the Ukraine project, which I thought was a great example of collaboration among many different organizations, but doing it with speed and agility, which I just thought was so impressive. And both Dell and Intel and at least a dozen other technology partners were involved with that project. And the impact that you make not only exists for the displaced people of Ukraine, but also the impact that it has for the employees that we were able to enlist in that project. They took a lot of satisfaction and got a lot of meaning and purpose out of being able to help and contribute, in their own way. So I think, as I read the description for this panel discussion, it was about, N50 as a program of programs.
Right.
I almost see N50 more, to use a term that's very popular, but I see N50 as more of a platform of programs, and a platform that brings together, someone said it, like-minded companies, but also like-minded individuals from those companies that are passionate about solving some of the world's most pressing problems, of which this digital divide and how we can better address digital inclusivity to impoverished communities. And so Kevin, for worldwide in particular, this has been very near and dear to us for the 32 years we've been in business. But we're the largest African-American owned enterprise in the United States. We were founded by Dave Stewart, an African-American, and he has instilled in all of us, and from a leadership perspective, the need to give back to our communities. Dave came from very humble background, took advantage of some programs with the federal government, but reinvested back into the business. And now we're a $15 billion company that, in our own regard, we have our own supplier diversity initiatives and do nearly $500 million of business with diverse suppliers. But something that's really key to us is developing talent. And Shashi said it well, and as did Kim, there's no reason why, helping our communities and doing good can't help our businesses as well. And we have several instances where we put together programs, whether it's high school for a STEM forum that Intel has helped us with historically, to Empower, that helps empower and create technical jobs for low income young adults as well as veterans, as well as even St. Patrick's Center here in St. Louis, which is a corporate charity that I serve on the board of, We have a workforce development program around computer skills, and Worldwide has ended up hiring 8 individuals just in the last 6 months from that program. And we've had some of the STEM high schoolers come into Worldwide as interns. So there's absolutely a way to do both with both, doing good and doing good for our businesses as well. And I think N50 is yet another very, very powerful platform to bring together, again, like-minded companies, but also like-minded individuals like all of us on the panel today.
Outstanding.
Yeah, and then something to add, right? But something that when Dan and I kind of started talking about the whole N50, we really wanted to make sure that we didn't want programs to be one-off, right? Because I think we've seen this. I mean, all of us have been around for a while, right? You have lots of projects, and then the ability to scale is a challenge, right? Because what happens is every project is one-off usually because the circumstances for each project are different. The country you're working in, the policies, the capabilities, everything is different, right? So one of the things we definitely want to do, and that's why I was fascinated with the topic that you had, right, David and Kevin, was to say it's the program of programs or the platform is, I think, and that's what's powerful, I think, about N50 with the number of partners we've been able to pull in is, how do we start replicating or creating some way of doing this more than once? Because all of us, I think somebody in one of the earlier sessions said, right, the initial capital runs out from a lot of companies, right? So you have to figure out how to sustain it. And the only way to sustain it is making it repetitive, right? And so that's something that I think I'm very passionate about, and making sure that we do more of that within the N50 program.
Shashi, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, any good platform is going to have a degree of flexibility to be able to bend and be agile to maybe those requirements that come up at that particular time. And I think the Ukraine project was a good example. Kevin and David, I'm not sure if that project was in your sights months before.
January wasn't.
It definitely wasn't. But because you had already started to create this platform again of like-minded companies and individuals, you were able to, and we've said this before, kind of rally the troops, to brainstorm and quickly ideate around, what could we do, and then from each company, what could we bring in terms of, for Worldwide, we brought some of our ecosystem and relationships, for Intel and Dell, you brought people and technology and, financial funding, which was very powerful. So in my mind, Shashi, it's like the platform's great, but it can't be so rigid, that it can't respond to the needs that are out there.
Sure.
Go ahead, Kim. I was going to ask.
Yeah, I was just going to say, topic of scale is very near and dear to my heart, because we went from 9 classrooms and 120 kids to 3,000 kids, 134 classrooms across multiple countries in 2.5 years, and I was leading that effort, and so it was a little overwhelming, not gonna lie. And so the topic of scale is really important, because you can do something in a handful of places really deep, right? But then when you go to breadth, what are you trading off, right? What are you giving up to get the breadth? What amount of depth are you giving up? And when it comes to working, especially with young adults, you don't want to give those things up, because it's that depth that's really creating the difference. And I think a lot of places will really lean in heavily to Bob's point on employee engagement and volunteerism, and that's really wonderful. You also have to acknowledge that they all have day jobs, right? and the things that get the paycheck are going to come first, because they have to for their family. And so, you have to be really careful about how much you leverage volunteerism and employee engagement when it comes to something that could fail, right? But also create the process, to Shashi's point, create the process that you can repeat. Like, without thinking, exactly what to do, exactly what to tell people, and become to get those crisp processes, those intakes, those bits of content, and get it really good. And I think the most difficult piece of this is everybody wants depth and breadth, and they want it tomorrow, right? And it's understanding that it takes time. You know, I love to bake, but it takes time to get the perfect recipe. You don't just open a book and it's the perfect recipe and the cake is perfect the first time. You have to make it a bunch of times, right? And then you're like, now I have the recipe. Now I can go teach 100 people to make this cake, right? And I think that a lot of times we don't want the time. We want it tomorrow. We want it to show up on a spreadsheet on a quarterly review tomorrow, and that's just not reality.
Yesterday, if possible, right?
Yeah. Yesterday would be nice.
Yeah. I've had the unique perspective and the pleasure, I would say, of watching each one of these programs, efforts manifest within each of these organizations, and it's been a different approach for each, but speaking to the point of, it takes a champion inside, and it takes some time for this to become something that then becomes normal and sustainable. And you guys each went down a journey with that. Bob, we've had conversations with it. Shashi, we talk about it every other week at Intel. How does this become something from a one-off to a standard, a platform, right, that we can use? And Kim, obviously, you know, we've watched this program grow for a couple of years and have to be, you know, champion, and it's disruptive, right, to an organization. What would you say to that? How did you, I'll just throw it out to each of you, how is that journey, how does that championing work so that the program becomes scalable within your organization?
I can start, right?
Okay.
One of the things that we started doing is kind of figuring out whether we can have a recipe finder, right? So we're kind of creating a tool, which is a challenge, as Kim said, and Bob also said, right? It has to be flexible. So what we're kind of trying to say is, can we invest in creating a tool where people can find these projects? Because, I mean, just as we've done it, I think what we've been together now for a year, right? The number of projects that have been started, right? From the projects in Arizona with, you know, Worldwide Technologies, you know, to helping to the school, to, you know, the different projects we've done there, to what we did in Zambia, to what we're doing in Ukraine, right? Trying to create a tool where people can put in some keywords and at least start a blueprint to start with, right? At least some ideas, so they don't have to start from scratch, right? At least get that head start, and then they can figure out. Then also being able to have with all the partners, what capabilities each of these partners are bringing, and having exposure to that so that they can find it and kind of, you know, work on these projects. I think that is something. But Kevin, you're absolutely right? It is a champion. And for us right now, it's been Dan who's been the champion. We've been finding projects. But then as we talk to people, sometimes we don't realize Intel being as large of a company as we are. There are a lot of these projects going on. And I don't know if you're all aware, right? Something that Intel does is they allow us to volunteer for a month at a time, and we find projects. So it's usually Intel sponsored, and they find, you know, what kind of capabilities you want. It's usually project management or IT skills. We go help a village, for example, setting up a school. And I think that's how Dan got himself introduced into it, because he did volunteer, and he was so, you know, that experience really changed him. And that's what kind of led him to start this N50 within Intel, right? So we have those opportunities, but what we, like I said, again, the thing was, can we create tools and use that Intel mentality to scale, which is what we do, right? What technology can we use to help others find projects?
Shashi, I couldn't agree with you more. You know, I think all of us being in the technology world, we know the mantra of people, process, and technology, right?
Yeah.
You know, in terms of needing to have all three to be successful in your project or your firm or whatever. And I got super excited a couple months ago because we rolled out a new volunteer platform called, I think it's called Benevity. And I was super excited about it because I'm like, this is perfect. I can use that as the internal platform to communicate these great opportunities with N50 and so forth. And then I realized it's like, but somebody's got to enter that, you know, someone's got to do the heavy lift to go research it and figure out how you're going to market it, right? You know, on the platform in terms of what that volunteer opportunity looks like. And some of these, especially with N50, they're not all like cookie cutter and buttoned up, right? There's a little creativity that we all need to bring to these projects and so forth. So the tool is great, and Intel's very good at that, and so is Dell, I'm sure. But it's like it also takes the people to do it as well. And again, I'll go back to, you got to create a tribe. You got to get some people along with you in order to scale. At least that's what I found.
Well, Bob, do you remember the end of The Wizard of Oz when they pull back the curtain?
Yeah.
Somebody pedaling a bike, right?
Yeah.
I've definitely pedaled that bike a lot
Mm-hmm.
to make Oz happen, right?
Yeah.
So what I would say to the question, how do you continue to champion against, possible disruption and the hurdles that are put in front of you? I was a middle school teacher, so I lead with the kids and the family. That's where my passion is. But I also acknowledge that doesn't show up on a spreadsheet. That doesn't show up on a PowerPoint. That's not going to get me through the hoops that I need to get the funding and the support and the resources, right? So what I would say to people, when you have this passion project that you're going to take from a one-off to a scale, the two musts that you have to have what you're going to measure and how. That's number one. Because if you can't show somebody it's successful, it's not successful. Even if you know it in your heart and your gut, it is. You can't show it, it's not. So what are you going to measure and how are you going to do it? And the other is align it to the business. What parts of the business will this program benefit? What parts of the business would want to champion this, pull in their employees for volunteering, give funding for it, produce headcount, and align with them from day one and show them the results forward? To me, those are the two things. What are you going to measure? How are you going to do it? Align to the business.
Couldn't agree with you more, Kim. And I tell you what, we're all accountable too. We want to know that we're delivering outcomes, right? That we're actually making an impact. And I think the added benefit, Kim, if we think about the end, at the beginning, like what's this really going to do and how we're going to measure it, it creates a finer, program or project in the first place, right? Because we know what we're trying to accomplish and we know how we're going to measure it. And by the way, if we haven't figured that out yet, then maybe the project isn't well enough defined, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing I would say is, and I'll give credit to David and Kevin and Aaron, that you have to be able to communicate well. You just do. There's a lot out there around being able to tell stories and storytelling and how important that is. And I would say David and Kevin and the N50 team and the Geeks team are very good storytellers. They're very good communicators in terms of the mission. And then as we're accomplishing things, we're good at telling the story about how we're doing. And it's not beating our chest, but it's just explaining the results that we're achieving, which is just so important. I mean, I really, really appreciate that. I personally wish I was a better storyteller and able to communicate the way David does.
You're doing pretty good there, Bob.
I'm working on it. Thanks, Kim.
You're being way too modest, Bob. And I'd like to just jump in and pick on the example that you gave earlier in this conversation about the Ukraine project. Mm-hmm. When we were sketching out the synopsis for this session, we were thinking about what we came into through that project. And I think it was discussed already just a few minutes ago. No, we were not planning well out to do the types of things that the partnership achieved with the Ukraine project. It all happened very quickly and unplanned. What we came into the realization of very quickly was that there were these programs that each of the partners had already before the Ukraine project, and coming into that project, which had something to say about the shape and form of what we did together. Mm-hmm. And as these revelations occurred, it was like, Dell has the Solar Hub project or program. Intel has been working for years in similar ways in other applications and other contexts, WWT likewise. And as we brought all that experience together for this new Ukraine project, then other N50 partners came forward. And one of those, most notably, was American Tower. They had a program called Digital Communities, which was based on, hello, containers kitted out with connectivity for applications and digital inclusion. And so fast forward, as we were writing the synopsis for this session, it was like, you know, we ought to explore that topic. You know, how do these programs, you know, most of the partners, maybe all of them, have programs. How do they relate to each other? How can 1 + 1 = 5 by bringing these in a more coordinated way? And let me just provide one more epilogue to the Ukraine story, and then I'll pull out of this line of thought. After the first few months, we were all startled by what the N50 partners who were involved on the Ukraine project demonstrated that we were capable of together. And now there is a discussion underway among some of those partners about, hey, wow, rather than this having been a one-off, is there on the platform, on the N50 platform, a frame that could be established where we can repeat this type of performance, leveraging multiple partners and their programs to drive rapid, more enduring success that will result in digital inclusion, among other things. And I just wanted to say, you know, it's like, okay, full circle, yes, now we are starting to plan so that we're ready for the next one. And maybe we can move even more quickly and more forcefully with greater impact. To your point, Kim, impact, you know, how do you measure that? How do you plan for that? And burn that into what we do together so that we are even more ready next time. That's sort of the nut that we wanted to crack in this conversation. And I wonder, is this all crazy talk, or is there something here that merits further discussion?
It's not mutually exclusive, David.
Yeah. No, but totally agree, right? I think, I mean, it's sad to say, right, what's happening in the world today, right? I think the Ukraine war has kind of also identified the need for agriculture, right? And in all honesty, even before, you know, a number of countries around the world have started looking at the agricultural supply chain as an example, right, of an area of focus we could get into. The US government, in fact, has identified a ton of funding for precision agriculture, right? We do know, for example, soil in the world is getting overutilized. So the actual output from farming is at a lower quality, and therefore it's creating a challenge, right? So food crisis is kind of coming. So similar to the portability containers for connectivity that we had for Ukraine, looking at some major areas of focus, I think would be great. For me, agriculture is one definite thing, just because even from an Intel perspective, because of everything that was happening and COVID kind of highlighted all of it, you know, there's another initiative Intel is part of. It's called the 5G OIL, you know, the 5G Open Innovation Lab. It's based in Seattle, right? A lot of kind of partners on this are on that as well. That's where Freedom 5 came in from, for example. But their precision agriculture has been a huge focus, you know, and we're kind of seeing how we can leverage that, right? So David, to your point, I think it's good to have certain areas at least that we have some kind of a blueprint or map and things like that, which can then be flexibly adopted depending on which country we need to deploy it in. You know, I mean, we're already doing it for education, I think, because of Zambia, right? We've got getting some good blueprints. And I think for me, but talking about blueprints and then actual implementation, right? Zambia, think about it, right? We've been at it for a year, right? It's like, you know, it's like the typical, the tip of the iceberg. You know, we started that project thinking it was going to be so simple, right? We're going to put in a network. It's going to be a little private wireless network. And then every week as we get onto the calls, right, we've seen, look at the challenges we've had to deal with, right? Everything, right? And at the end of the day, yes, we're getting success, but it's taken a lot of effort to do that. But if we could get the learnings from that and do it. So I would love to see, you know, connectivity, you know, of course, in time, you know, to help people who are dislocated or from their areas. Another could be agriculture, and a third could be education. Could be some focus areas we could work on.
Mm-hmm.
Shashi, you are echoing 100 conversations that have been held in different contexts across the trajectory of that Ukraine project and other projects as well. And let me just illustrate that a little bit further by saying, it started out when we gifted the assets, the containers to World Vision. Their specialty, what they wanted to focus on from an application standpoint was education. Okay, fine. So education-oriented partners immediately began to come forward who had an interest in contributing towards that objective. As the refugee population shifted to new locations, as the chronology of need that they were expressing evolved, we began to see other applications called for. And this is still a work in progress. We're still seeing new applications. Health is the latest. We have the Walensky Institute now has stepped forward and said, please, we would like support. We love this asset. Can we have some? So at each iteration, with different applications being put on the table by the local community themselves, we're seeing different permutations of the N50 partners stepping forward, and partners even bringing in non-partners who have those specialties. So I love the idea that we would begin to articulate a health-specific capability that can be plugged and played, that can be scalable, sustainable, that will, Kim, to your point, align with the business and, yes, be, from a practical standpoint, measurable. Education, health, agriculture, this has got to be an action item, Kevin.
Oh, absolutely, David. And what we continue to hear is that there are these project focus areas that Shashi mentioned, but that within that is another one that sort of threads through all of it, is that can our response to a situation be part of the resilience? And can we have resilience so we are better able to respond? And this is the same thing came up with Dr. King this morning, right? And is N50, a great platform for that type of work? Because well, I've heard it from all of our partners. When a disaster happens, everyone wants something now, right? Which is the hardest thing to do. And couldn't we instead do something that ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure? Can we be ready as a team, because no one organization has everything at hand anyways to do this? And what are our learnings from Ukraine? What worked, what didn't? And even though it was remarkable how quickly we got there with containers, we could have done it faster, right? If we had been ready, right? So thinking about the comment you made, Shashi, about agriculture, right? Huge focus area. Certainly the precision ag is going to have to be something that is elevated in terms of a process, or we won't be able to eat. Behind that is education. And so one of the things that I'm noticing when I'm exploring that work around regenerative farming and so forth is that farmers don't even have a really good understanding of how soil works, right? And so they're just doing that same known process of putting more chemicals in, more chemicals this year, less output next year, until the land just doesn't work anymore. So education is the thing that has to be, and that's a long process. Kim, how long of a process is that education process? Decades, right?
I think this kind of, I was thinking this earlier, when we said platform is overused, so it becomes not a term, technology can be overused, so it's not. I think education is becoming there. It's a mantra that a lot of people are saying, education. And like, what does education mean to you? Is it reading, writing, and arithmetic? Is it a skill that gets you a job? Is it to know how to function in society? Is it digital literacy? What is education to you? And I would just love to see us all begin to have the conversations of what particular type of education we're talking about. Because, when we're talking about what you just mentioned, Kevin, we're talking about a skill-based education. right? But they, you know, reading, writing, arithmetic are not going to be as important in that particular instance. But there are places where that's going to elevate them to their next opportunity is our 4 core education. So I think I just keep hearing education, you know, from a lot of different entities. And I would love to begin to have a really focused conversation on what does education mean to you?
Love it.
Let me
Yeah,
just,
I agree, Kim. When Kevin was talking about education and then went into farmers, you know, that's not who I was thinking about, right? You know,
He likes to do that.
yeah, but it's great though, because there is different types of education and training and skills development and workforce development that can all come under that education umbrella. And I think words matter. You know, I think being more specific helps us tell a better story and can get people, well, one, get them, you know, aligned correctly right up front by what we're talking about, but also getting them committed.
and you know, let me just say, we could have kicked this portion of the conversation off by focusing on the need to be more clear about what we are discussing when we say agriculture, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at the Limbo project in Zambia. You know, they came to us initially asking for education. That turned out to, you know, that did get refined and defined more carefully through coordination with the community. And then the service started to flow, and the next thing they asked for was health. And now, guess what? They're asking for animal husbandry information. And, you know, is that agriculture? Or if it's not, should agriculture, however we define it, be added to the conversation as a potential counterpoint, something more sustainable than animal husbandry or whatever. I don't want to get too sidetracked on that, but the point is that defining our terms, and if we're going to have set pieces for N50 projects on education to be defined, agriculture, health, and other applications, that's going to be critical, as you say, Kim and Shashi and Bob.
Yep.
You know, David, our angel Aaron is going to be up on the screen in just a moment to tell us it's time, because the time flew by. But it is interesting, isn't it, Aaron, how every time we start a new project, it always starts with a conversation like this, where we end up figuring out where does it hurt and what can we do about it together. And here we are, right? There's 2 or 3 things just out of this session. They're like, it hurts here, and what can we do about this together?